It's alive. Oh, it's alive.
I'm not singing for it.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
I love you.
I know.
Here's Johnny.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
I see dead people.
Milk was a bad choice.
Hello and welcome to the first ever How to Be a Movie Snob. I am Seth, joined here with the lovely Mariah.
Hello.
And we want to talk about movies. And the concept is, why would I want to be a snob? Well, it's very self-serving. Not only do I just want to be, the guy who just knows stupid stuff at parties, but I also want to get better at making movies. I am a full-time filmmaker, and I realize that I am not a true movie snob. In fact, I have a long way to go to be a snob. And I realized, even in my small little video business in Oregon, a lot can be learned from these amazing films that have come throughout the years. But I knew I couldn't do this alone. So, the person who I know has watched more movies than anyone else I know, Mariah. Mariah, where does your love of movie begin? And kind of give us your history of where you're at with the whole movie snobbery.
Oh, well, I came from parents that are both movie snobs in their own right, but come from very, very different places. I was raised on my father showing me all of the John Wayne movies, nice. Clint Eastwood movies, any war type of movie, along with James Bond and really anything high-tech and violent and historical war-wise. Ish. And then on my mom's side was raised on Disney movies, musicals, British movies.
Murder mysteries and every murder mystery under the frickin' sun.
Any Agatha Christie that was made into a movie, I've seen every version. And any Jane Austen made into a movie, I've seen every version.
Okay, so let's get down to who we are movie-wise. I don't think I even prepped you for this. What movies have you seen the most, like rewatched the most, over and over again?
Well, as a lady from the 80s and 90s, I was always watching repeatedly all the Brat Pack movies growing up. I watched Mannequin and Dirty Dancing and Grease.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I found my niche at some point there. And now that I rewatch them as an adult, I realize, yes, there are some redeeming qualities, but these aren't you call high quality movies.
Fair. That's fair. Now, but there is a definite place for them in cinema history and often change the game. Okay, so I had to go with the most watched. Can you guess which movie I've watched the most?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail, by far, not even close. And I don't know. Did you guys watch that when you were in high school? Like, was that a thing?
I watched it when we came to visit your house.
Because it's such like an overplayed dork thing now that I didn't know many other people in high school that watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
No, not very many.
So my only cred to like movie snobbery is liking this before it was cool to like it, in a sense. Mm-hmm. The other movie, number 2, that I've seen.
Spaceballs?
No, good guess. Actually, I didn't watch Spaceballs that much. I probably only seen it.
Strange Brew.
And this one is where I start to joke about movie snobbery. yeah, there's a guy who played Jesus in that film, and he's the bad guy.
Max von Sydow.
That's right.
Love that guy.
Love that guy. He was in some amazing movies. So arguably changed the course of history for cinema. And by the way, it is based on Hamlet. So it's basically high class entertainment. And then after that, we start to degrade into. I mean, don't get me wrong, Adam Sandler. Love him to death, but all of course the Happy Gilmores and the Billy Madisons and all the thing of my era. I remember memories in the movies, and I'm going to go a couple different ways here. The first memory I have is laughing so hard. It was either Ace Ventura or Happy Gilmore, but it was something that just hit the essence of what I was as a 13-year-old boy, and literally falling out of my chair laughing so hard, not thinking that anything could be that funny ever again. And that was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. In the bathtub, shampoo is better, conditioner is better.
Or it might have been like, I want to ask you a question. Whatever, ridiculous. And I couldn't believe things could be that funny. And because Monty Python is different. Like, it wasn't like that laugh out loud. And so, and as much as I've loved all those things. I also, things that kind of influenced me a little bit more is I did move to China and lived there for almost a decade. And that was kind of during this like China, like resurgence, not resurgence, but really popularity in the States, because I loved Kung Fu movies growing up, like Jackie Chan and Drunken Master and some like the ones that like were only on VHS that no one really had. But then when I moved to China, like there was this whole like Hidden Dragon, Crouching Tiger, and then the Daggers. There's all these great movies that were just over the top cinematic and crazy. And it was just like, the rest of the world doesn't see movies the same way we do. And it was this great like opening. And it was kind of cool because it also happened to coincide with like, the US being open to these new movies as well, like Kung Fu Hustle. And later it just seemed to be like a decade of Chinese movies really coming to the forefront. And so that was kind of a fun time for me as well, just thinking, this is totally different. And then I came back and I started making little travel films and YouTube and all that. But the more I play with cameras and the more I capture things, I can't help but being drawn to seeing what makes a movie good. What makes a quote unquote movie into that snob category. And so that's the adventure I want to go on. I want to take us on that journey, but I want to do it in a way that's not like traditional snobbery, because traditional snobbery, we talk about like, well, obviously, because that DP was working with him and so they totally stole it from Bicycle Thieves or whatever other. And we're not going to be total snobs about this, but we want to have normal conversations about being a snob where we actually view it, we acknowledge the feelings we're feeling from what we've seen, and then hopefully we analyze it a little bit to see how they did that and what made that so special. And for me personally,
how to recreate it, because doggone it, that is what I'd love to do, is tell stories. And is there not anything more beautiful? And anyone who's worked in photography or film or journalism, you want to tell these perfect stories. You want to tell stories that not are only true to it, but that actually can move people. And I'll go into the weeds a little bit more with some of the critique of Citizen Kane, but there's something about retelling the truth of humanity. And that was a big change with Citizen Kane, because before it was the illusion is what the cinemas was for. And I'm not against that, but there's something about catching those true stories that I think is just wonderful. So without further ado, should we jump into it? I think we should.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Citizen Kane, I mean, there's not, what movie's been talked about more? It's okay. First question, overrated or underrated? Citizen Kane. Go.
I think it stands up to the hype. I think it is an amazing movie. I think everything that went into it, the cinematography, the direction, the production, the actors, the lighting, every single, and I think because of all those things being so solid, it does hold up. I think it is a really good movie.
Oh, it's so good. I just watching it again, I couldn't believe how quick it went. The pacing was so good. It still rings true as just a plain story. Take away the sound or the makeup or the cinematography. It's still like the story just rings true and is so good on its own. And, you know, that's like every filmmaker's mantra. It's the story, stupid. But, oh man, it just rings true on so many levels. So, a little background of the story. I want to dive into just a little bit. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, Rosebud is a sled. Okay, sorry. Which is kind of a ridiculous premise, by the way. A sled? Really? That's where you... But it's still...
It took 2 hours to get here.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Maybe the biggest thing about this movie is it just suckered us. It literally is never gonna give you up, Rosebud sucker.
Rick rolled us straight into the sled.
Straight in. Didn't see Rick rolling coming, did you?
There's always a place.
Oh, Rick, you're the best. And much like Rick, Orson Welles' first hit was his biggest.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily Orson Welles' faults either. Some of his movies were tankered with later in his career. But Orson Welles was legit a genius when he was like 3. And if you heard much of his stuff growing up, like he could have conversations like an adult early on. He could he traveled with his father when he was young. He lived in China for a while. He was interested in being a magician. He ran into Houdini one time, and Houdini actually taught him a trick. And then he tried to quickly do the trick back to Houdini, and Houdini's like, whoa, don't do a trick until you practice 1,000 times. And that was something that like they say like, oh, that's probably what kind of, you know, got him into it. But he was like legit genius level that talked not like a normal adult, a 3-year-old, 5-year-old. And he was going to be like this music prodigy because that's what his mom was raising him. Oh, by the way, he didn't really do normal school, of course, but he had this inquiring mind, and he would just ask people things and just
absorb it
all of it. Not only absorb it, just understand it. And then you just take that. And that's what's so amazing about Citizen Kane. I believe, yes, Orson Welles is responsible, but I would argue not as much as he gets credit for. And I don't take away that he was 1,000% a genius and ahead of his time, but he leaned heavy on all the pieces that made that movie what it was, including the writing,
right? Including
the cinematography, which wasn't him. He laid the way for it, but it was the DP, that director of photography, changed the game. The makeup was ahead of its time. The lighting, the sound design, all unheard of stuff. But it wasn't just him, but it was him knowing what he wanted and being too dumb and stubborn to know that he was wrong. For better, for worse. And that's the lovely thing about Orson Welles. He seemed to end up to become Kane.
Yeah, I was going to say, just like his character.
It's the most crazy thing. It's like an autobiography that isn't. And so him growing up in these weird circumstances where his mother died when he was super young, and then he was with his father, but his father was drinking himself to death, so he left his father, and his father ended up drinking himself to death. Often there was people saying like, oh, is it dad taking care of him, or is he taking care of his dad? And he's like 8 or 9 at the time. His mom's already been dead. And that's what he grew up in. And then his dad does die. And oh, by the way, his brother is in insane asylum because he probably had a form of autism that was, couldn't be diagnosed back then. And that's his life when he's just a kid. And he gets accepted to Harvard and says no and just starts traveling, ends up going to Ireland I think Dublin, and he lies and says, "Oh, I'm a big Broadway star from the States." And the joke was, everyone knew he was obviously lying, but they were so hard up for actors that they did it. And so the first thing he did was a lead. And the joke was, he started as the lead, and he got slowly got lesser and lesser parts. But then he started also, becoming the amazing director that he became. He was called, and then he couldn't get work permit, had to go back to the States, and then started directing plays in America. And he, at the time, he got to the point where he was the most acclaimed play director in the States. And that's just another thing, like that's a lifetime achievement when he was in his teens, early 20s. And then, of course, the monumental thing, his voice, which was incredible. I'm sure the musical background and the dictation from his mother's schooling and strict adherence to making sure that he can have a intelligent sounding 3-year-old. What the heck? And so then he does radio, like overdubbing. And he was like running from studio to studio so much. He was getting so much work. It was like $2,000 a week back in what year was it? In the early 19 teens. And then the thing that changed everything was the War of the Worlds. Oh.
I love listening to this.
Have you listened to the whole thing?
Yeah.
What was it?
It's been a long time, but
yeah,
his voice, oh my gosh, he kind of transports you.
It's insane. 100 years old, and it's still like, this is so good. And you could totally see why people were freaked out.
Oh, yeah.
When was the first time you listened to it? Like the first time you heard?
I was at my grandmother's house in Eastern Oregon, and my cousin had all the tapes, and he came.
No way.
And we would just sit and listen to them and draw.
That is so cool. Is this Jesse?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think we were probably in 4th grade, 5th grade.
That is so cool. By the way, Mariah's
young enough to get freaked out.
Yeah.
But also really into it.
Yeah. And that's so fun about being that age, because you could still like get yourself hyped up to like, this is real.
And you can kind of just picture people huddled around a radio, because that's the entertainment they had. And oh man, that's like the horror movies of those days.
Oh, and then some. And then no one has ever done it in the sense where they use radio, like news sounding thing, part of the story. That was unheard of at the time. Crazy.
I wonder how many conspiracy theorists sprung from listening to.
Oh my gosh. Now it's so hard now with conspiracy theory being the norm. Remember in the 90s when like the 80s it was weird when you had a conspiracy theorist? Now it's weird when someone doesn't have a conspiracy theory, because it's just so but back then, like, we hadn't been to the moon yet. Mars was still probably a thing. There's some conflicting about how much like craziness was on the streets. Like, was it really as crazy as they said? You know what I mean? But one story that was pretty great. This guy and gal were on a date. The dude runs out of the car when he hears it, away from her, leaves her there, and he goes like hiding for cover. Where's he going? It's like those scary movies where they run away from the car behind the chainsaws, like that commercial.
I'm gonna go into the shed where all the knives are swinging around.
Should we go into that running car? What are you, crazy? Oh, oh, it's so good. So that, so then I didn't finish the punchline. So then later the guy tries to ask the girl out. He's like, sorry, I found a nice Martian to settle down with. Burn. And so that's when the studio started calling. Like, everyone wanted him for Hollywood. But you know what the irony was? He didn't want to go. Which I didn't know that at all. I thought, oh yeah, this guy's ego, he's going to want to go there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, he's only 23 at the time when this happens. Right?
Yeah.
Good night. So he starts because his real love is still the theater. He's still, and he's, got the chops to do it. But it took 2 failed plays to get him to go to Hollywood.
Desperation.
Exactly right. Desperation made Citizen Kane happen. But because so many people were calling at the time, he kind of changed the industry. He had this insane deal with RKO. RKO asked him once and he said no, asked him again, no. And the deal kept getting better and better. So he got this crazy deal, which I don't think, I'm sure it's been done before. I know Kevin Costner with Dances with Wolves, he was the director, producer, actor. But Orson Welles got final cut. Like he got, like, not only does he get to do all the things, and by the way, he's never been on a movie set. His first movie set he'd ever been on was the first day he was directing not Citizen Kane, but the RKO movies. Because he had this I didn't know either. He had 2 failed movie attempts before he did Citizen Kane. One of them was a budget issue, and one of them just he didn't finish because he got bored and tried it out. And so then he finally starts to make Citizen Kane. And this is the fun part. So when he was doing the play stuff, he was an acclaimed director, and he did some pretty cool things. Like he had an all black cast for a Shakespeare play that got everyone loved it, just loved it. He also started his own company called the Mercury Theater, because it was the theater he was working for was like a government paid theater. Yeah, because this is like the Depression, so they're trying to get out of the Depression. So he would be directing these plays for this public theater, but then he started his own called Mercury Theater. Those are all the actors in Citizen Kane. He brought all the people he worked with at Mercury Theater with him to the set of Citizen Kane, so he knew how to work with them. He knew how to direct him. He changed parts that would better match their ability or their acting style, which makes total sense when you see Citizen Kane. You're like, it's like they were made for these parts. Well, yeah, the parts were made for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, let's talk about that. Let's talk about just the first time we saw it now. So we get to here. He has full rights. One more thing before we talk about our feelings. I swear we'll talk about our feelings.
Put it eventually. Off as long as you have.
I know, right? My wife's like, yeah, surprise, surprise. Not going to talk about what you really feel. Mank, the writer of Citizen Kane. Have you seen the movie Mank?
No.
Oh my goodness, that's on your to-watch list next. Now that you've dove into Citizen Kane, basically, Herman Mankiewicz, which everyone called Mank, wrote Citizen Kane.
Yes.
Orson Welles had some notes, but he gave it to Mankiewicz.
But got credit for the screenplay.
Yes.
With him.
But his contract said he didn't have to. He signed a contract that said he would get no credit. But if you look at Mank's career, it kind of sucked. He was like a 200 batting average consistently. He just always was there, showed up. More like a 230, 250. He still gets in the order, but really he never hit anything. So when he realized how good Citizen Kane was going to be, then he realized like, oh, I want to be part of this. Anyways, that's a whole drama too, but the movie's great. I don't know. It's definitely from his side of the story, but it was incredible. But the screenplay, this is where the whole movie gets into trouble later, is about the newspaper mogul. And this is where everything goes downhill. And this is where, because Mank was friends with said mogul, like in his inner group. And that inner group was the group that was the A-listers of Hollywood at the time. And then he got kicked out of that group, and he was still reeling and pissed off about it.
Oh.
And that's when he wrote Citizen Kane the way it was. And apparently Mankiewicz's version was even more, obviously.
You knew exactly who they were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that was a lot of intro. Citizen Kane, if you don't know the story. Actually, Mariah, can you give me a summary? Do you think you could figure that out? Top of your head, summary?
A summary of the movie?
The movie.
The plot?
The plot. Good luck.
Oh, man. There's so many facets to this.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to try and cut this down to the basics. So, a very wealthy young man comes into his fortune, and instead of taking over the empire, he chooses to focus on one sad, lonely newspaper that he owned, and said, I feel like I want to make newspapers. And so he does, and becomes really popular for outing a lot of people and blowing the cover on a lot of people.
Yellow news, as it's sometimes called.
He gets a lot of readers and a lot of enemies. He takes up a political career. He's married a few times.
Shot with Hitler. You see that scene? I was like, holy crap.
Yes. And, it kind of just, it starts with him, with so much money at his fingertips and so much opportunity and he starts off with this whole philanthropic kind of thing. And
for the people.
It all comes not working out in his favor in the end.
You know what the movie was originally called? The American. Right?
Which is what he called himself of all the things. I'm an American. And
I mean, this is spoiler. Arguably, Orson Welles fights against what the American dream is. Basically, that the American dream is the lie. It always has been, and it's so good. Like when I think about that, I'm like, oh my goodness. I've also heard this movie reference. Citizen Jobs, Citizen Trump, Citizen Gates. It's just over and over, and it's so interesting. So the original person was based off of my the newspaper mogul is William Randolph Hearst, who was the most powerful man, arguably in the United States at the time, because he controlled the newspapers. And so who controlled the newspapers controlled what was told to the people. His biggest rival, Pulitzer. Yes, that Pulitzer. And they were the two industry giants. And so if you made either one of them mad, guess what? You ain't getting featured. And that's actually why Citizen Kane lost money in the box office later, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But we want to talk about why it is being a snob movie. What makes this such a snob fest of a movie? Because you cannot claim to be a snob without watching Citizen Kane, appreciating Citizen Kane, or if you're Ingrid Bergman, hating Citizen Kane, which is he's the only filmmaker I found who doesn't like Citizen Kane. But he's a piece of work on in his own right. So let's talk about our humble opinions of Citizen Kane and how we get to appreciating it and then applying to what we think about movies from here going forward. So, the feeling you get when you watch Citizen Kane, how do you feel when you watch it, and kind of let's go from there.
I think that, number one, I love the use of light in this movie. It highlights the things you're supposed to be paying attention to. It blurs the things that you are aware of but don't need to see the details of, and it just kind of leads you through, and you see this person who you think sometimes is meaning well and then other times is just destroying his own life.
How do you feel about the character himself?
It depends on what minute of the movie I am watching it.
I totally agree. Do you like him? Do you hate him?
Sometimes. Depends on what marriage he's in.
But I love that scene when they get older and just get more bickery.
Yeah.
Oh, so fun.
Oh, yeah.
So fun. You don't hate him in the end, though.
No.
I like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like he's not a bad guy, despite all of the craziness. Like, he seems to be this epitome of this horrible person, but you don't hate him.
I feel like he's a narcissist with great intentions.
Yeah, 100%. Like, he just doesn't know.
But always a narcissist.
Yeah. Which, arguably, a lot of great men and women of history.
Yeah. And so many plots just, yeah. I mean, I remember thinking as I'm watching this, it's Henry VIII.
Right. That's great. Exactly right.
Absolutely. I was like, there are so many similarities here, someone with all this power, someone whose first wife adored him, and I'm just sitting there like replaying this going, oh man, missed all the good things he could have had. And
you could do that over and over in history.
Yeah, there's so many great stories that have the same theme.
It's just it's overwhelming sometimes when you think about it, because you could almost argue every president ever, in some senses of the word, like, because to get to that high office of power, you're going to lose some friends. And is it more important than the friendships you have? And anyone, honestly, of any powerful position throughout history, you'd go like all of the titans of industry, quote unquote, they're all Citizen Kane-esque.
Yeah. And in this movie, he does marry a relative of the president of the United States.
Right. Oh, it's so good. Oh, no, I totally agree with the use of light. Now, I'm going to jump into a little technical thing immediately because I feel like the use of light traditionally before that time was like the face, soft on the women, harder on the villains. Like a hard light would be like there's no like filter or anything, so you just can see all the all the wrinkles, all the details. But when you make them all like blurry, but there's just like light. The classic thing is you light the opposite side of the camera, so you're always shooting toward the dark side, which that's true still in Citizen Kane. But what Citizen Kane did differently is usually only the actor or actress who's speaking is in focus and nothing else is. They called it deep focus. So the whole frame is basically in focus from these crazy big looming shots where you literally could see the ceiling and the floor, and you could see it'd be like 50 feet back in the back corner. And those are the two people talking. And then you have someone walking by, and then you have two people in front who you can still see their faces in focus, and they're talking while the couple in the back are also talking. Yeah. And the couple in the back are the ones who are the focus, quote unquote. It's unlike anything anyone's ever seen before. And even today, like you still rarely see someone, because on the camera, it's like the f-stop. The lower the number of the f-stop means is the wider open it is, so that's a more shallow depth of field, which even I am like, oh yeah, do the shallow depth of field. But I'm like, oh my gosh, when you have that, the higher number and the smaller hole so you can get more things in focus, it gives people an opportunity. But then that's when the use of light makes it draws you. You don't have to look at this thing because it's in focus, but the light, the way he backlit, the way he shot light. Yeah. And my favorite is how he made faces dark.
Yes. And when they're all discussing who's going to go interview who about Rosebud and find out more information.
So
and
good.
You don't even see the staff except for that they're all huddled together and they're just using this light in such an amazing way.
So
Everyone
good.
is, oh man, it's good. And then also the reporter digging through the archives.
Yes.
And you get till 4:30 and you can read these pages and the security guard is all the way at the back and
good.
You see his face clearly.
That scene where he walks into that room with the light on the table, like it's one of the most iconic. I literally think I do wedding films a lot. I'm like, this would be the most amazing shot for a wedding film.
Oh, it really would. Oh my gosh.
But just silly things like that, and it's not like a just a pretty, but it's a stunning. And the one I think about, and we should talk about our favorite scenes in the movie, but the clapping for his wife when no one else is clapping. Yes. He starts with the light on him, and as he starts to do the heavy clap, he stands up, and then his face is in the dark. And it's just this. It's almost so obvious how you're supposed to feel with the light. And I know movies have used light before, but with that, with the deep focus and the combination of the options of viewing, it really is moving. So, okay. So we talked about these aspects of what Citizen Kane is, the snobbery. So we realize there's a lot of things that change the game. What are some other moments? Oh, let's talk about I didn't 3 favorite scenes and why. Okay, I'm gonna give you a little second. I'll start. The first one has to go is the clapping scene. I have to start with the clapping scene because it is such a painful, want to look away, determination to stick with my guns when he fully realizes how wrong he is. And it's such a great moment of helplessness of the powerful main character. And it's just, it's when you know that his, not life is over, but essentially it's never going to be the same. He'll never be the Kane he was. And that was like, I feel like that was the hopeless moment that took the film to its demise. Okay, that was my first one. You go now before I come in.
Yeah, I've already got two already.
Okay, nice.
So the one I was first thinking of was the beginning with his parents and him getting it taken away. And you start off inside the house with the parents and he's playing outside in the snow and you can see him clearly
so good
having a snowball fight with himself out there, and he just keeps popping up and down. And you know what drew my attention to that? My son coming in and watching me rewatch that piece, and he goes, look, he's playing out in the snow and look at the snowman. And there are things I never noticed before, but my 6-year-old sure did.
He's an only child, by the way. Did you cry? Oh my gosh.
Well, now thinking about it, I should,
but you're heartless.
At
You
the
don't
time,
feel
he
feelings.
drew
Yeah,
my
that's
attention
true.
to that.
That's
As an
amazing.
adult, I'm watching the mother at this point going, what is wrong with her? This cold woman. And then as he's getting taken away, you realize she's doing this for him. The father is abusive.
I was going to ask you about that because that's debated. It's never explicit, but it says to keep him away from, he says that one line that makes it seem like, oh crap, there's a lot more going on that we don't know about.
Yeah, this kid needs to get walloped.
Exactly.
That's why he's leaving.
Exactly right. So that is the implication that most people agree with.
Which is what I read. Yeah. Get him out of here.
But let's say it wasn't. I still would say it would still be the situation because.
But you still see the humanity in his mother.
Yes.
At some point, it goes from, is she just cold and wants to...
It's like, is she Nurse Cratchit or is she a loving mother?
Right. And of course it comes around and you realize she, kept things and... Yeah.
Oh, it's so hard. That's so good though. That's a great... Oh.
Yeah, you'll have to go back and rewatch him in the window.
I know. I watched that scene like 2 or 3 times. So I'll tell you a little secret. I watched the whole movie without sound.
Oh.
And it was amazing. It was. I'm literally going to start doing this with my own movies. I'm not even joking because it's like
if it's not good without.
If I can't tell what's going on without sound, and I cheated. I did have the subtitles on too, but I was actively just drawn to it. And I didn't do this, which some people suggested, listening to it without watching it. Because the sound design back then was... I mean, it's so hard now because sound design on great movies are insanely good and next level. But for the time, it did things like... The one example was when he's about to be elected. He's basically won it. And then his wife talks to him. All the cheers go away within seconds. And it's just him and her voice with a dull murmur, which... accurately is wrong, but emotionally is the magnitude of that moment in the film. And that's when it, and I thought, and so that was to be the next, if I really get into the Citizen Kane obsessionness, that would be a great one. The next scene, this is kind of a lame scene. It's not lame, but the intro, the grandness of the intro draws you in so quickly. And one thing I think about is you get just this little bit of time to get someone's attention in today's environment. I was still drawn in by that 1941 movie, by the grandness and the story of who Citizen Kane was immediately. It's this great teaser reel for the movie at the very beginning. And I'm like, this is brilliant. Not only sets the plot and gets you through a ton of plot points, it's interesting as heck. This is like Lifestyle of the Rich is Famous meets his History Channel meets, all the gossip channels you ever wanted to watch. It's so, and it's also just beautifully shot too, as of course everything was. Okay, Tag, you're it.
Okay, I'm thinking of that point where his wife shows up and says, I'm going to this address. Come with me if you want to. And he goes, and it's it's so many things happening at once. And it's one of those points in the movie where you almost like him and then you don't like him again. And then it goes back and forth because the guy that he's running against looks pretty shady up until the point where he shows up, you know, to the girlfriend's house.
Yeah.
And you find out he's doing all this because it's already been happening to him and he has no way to fight back except for to threaten him with publishing. You know, he's just fighting dirty with dirty, and suddenly everything takes a turn and they both walk out at the wife and the guy he's running against both walk out the door and they're both like, good night.
That was a great moment. Can I get you a car?
Yeah.
The pause.
There's just so much happening in those moments.
The pause when she asks him, do you want to come with me? Is a lifetime. And I remember thinking, how long did he wait?
Yeah.
You know, the hilarious thing I'm thinking of is in Frozen when her hair turns gray. It's like, do you like it? You paused. And I'm like, that's awkward because we all know what really happened. So that's, you know, the funny thing is too, like, I remember thinking, oh, they haven't had sex yet. Orson Welles and
it's totally innocent, and he
yeah.
just listened to her sing and helped her with her
exactly
toothache.
right. No, and even when I was watching, I'm like, oh, see, they didn't cheat on. I'm like, idiot. Like, everyone in the movie theater knows that something actually happened, and Orson Welles knows something actually happened. But I remember watching for the first time thinking, oh, it's just because she knows that he kind of likes her and might like her more than, like, no, you moron. This is actually, they've been doing it, dude.
This is happening.
This is real. Oh, naivety is it's a wonderful thing. Oh, the next scene. It's so hard because everything is like literally picturesque. Often I've had some mentors say, like, you want every frame of your film to look like a photograph. Every frame in that freaking movie is a photograph. And I think because the director of photography, Orson Welles, often has said, like, he's the best ever. He just won the Oscar the year before he did this, and he wanted to work with Orson Welles. And you know why he said he wanted to work with Orson Welles? Because he said, you never made a movie before. You don't
want to be the first.
It's like, you don't know any better. You don't know what can't be done. And so,
you know, theater lighting,
yeah. Oh yeah. And he also knew theatrics. And you ready for the irony of this? Movies back then were shot like plays. You knew it was one set. People walked onto the set. People walked off to the set. And the irony was Orson Welles, the master of theater, made his movie look the least amount like a freaking play. Because he's like, oh, cameras can do this sort of thing, so let's make it do that instead of the normal thing. And of course, everyone talks about drilling holes in the floor so they could shoot up on those angles, which was very cool and very nuts. But I was drawn to, like, how many times, I think it's called a Dutch angle, but instead of going straight on, it would be a sideways. And that happened so much more than I thought. I mean, the other thing, of course, was the ceiling to floor shot, everything in focus a lot.
Yeah.
And it was the emptiness feeling and the grandeur and the hopelessness all the time. And you couldn't, but the thing is, that's not Orson Welles making those decisions. That's Greg Toland. And he's the one that made it the greatest movie of all time. Without him, it's a good story, probably well acted, but it's not the dynamite piece that stands up to time like it does. And it just, the sad thing about him, he died when he was 44. And he made, ready for the movies? I'm going to give you Wuthering Heights, The Long Voyage Home, Grapes of Wrath, The Best Years of Our Lives, and Citizen Kane.
Oh, all good.
Insane.
Best years of our lives on the list.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, I mean, Grapes of Wrath was no slouch.
Yeah, no.
It's insane. So what he did in that short life he lived is just...
I'm just picturing the way all those movies are shot, and I see it now. Oh, that's so cool.
I watched a highlight reel of his work with his, like, some classical music in the background. It was just like, oh... because the shadow, like you talked about before, the shadow work he does is just, And that's one thing I love how I'm doing the application throughout. It's not like this, because you got to live in the shadows. Like the shadows are so important, which is so funny on a wedding day because we light the crap out of everything. But but for other like stuff, like those shadows or the faces that aren't the subjects, like the reactions are so important.
Mm-hmm.
So Tolan, it was a loss to cinema for sure. But man, thank goodness he wanted to do it. But that's without him, and without the cast that he worked with, and without complete anonymity, we never get Citizen Kane.
Right.
Oh.
And a good, juicy real life story to spin off of.
And a pissed off writer a pissed off mediocre writer who wrote the hell out of the best script of his life. And then, And then we haven't even talked about the makeup yet. The makeup artist was one of the first people to ever use latex. So let's go with, like, by the way, Orson Welles in Citizen Kane when he was older looked like Orson Welles when he was older.
Yeah.
It was so, that's
they made that pretty believable.
Yeah. The argument was like, Benjamin Button should take some notes from Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just unreal. So it was so impressive taking people who weren't normally in movies, but you still had, like, of course you had the great Tolan who's been making every amazing movie, but then you have a director who's never been in movies, you have actors who've never been in movies, and then you have, like, by the way, the person who does the latex stuff he was like sweeping floors. He wasn't even like, because that wasn't accepted as like good makeup back then.
Right.
So it's just, misfit toys. I feel like genius comes from misfit toys and not knowing any better. And they lost 30% of their budget because it was when the war started. They knew the war was about to start because they thought no one was going to watch movies. And during the war, of course, everyone watched movies. It was one of the most profitable time in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it was just, so did I give my third scene yet? Have I skirted the issue like 3 times?
I don't know. I'm still trying to decide on one. So make sure if you have already done it, do
another one. Okay, I'm gonna do another one. So I think it's so interesting that the scenes where everything is going bad hit you so hard because these rise and fall stories that are so commonplace now. This was kind of the blueprint for it. So I would have to say that it's because it's such a stark contrast to this loud character. So the character I love, of course, is this is embarrassing. I just forgot the main the main number 2 actor in the whole stinging movie was Leland, played by Joseph Colton. And Jedediah. And he's like, I always think of like Paul Drake from Perry Mason. Like, he's the number 2. He's the better looking one. He's the one who writes, and he's like, kind of like, you can't fool me. I know who you really are the whole time. And the scene that it's kind of an unremarkable scene, but it's him telling the story when he's older. That was the first thing he shot. Orson Welles had like got, I think, what did he break his leg or something? But he was in a wheelchair, and so Joseph, who's never acted in a movie before, had to get in full makeup and play the old person. That's the first thing they shot in the movie.
Oh, how strange!
Right?
Start there,
and it's just him, like a huge monologue, and that was the first thing they shot in the freaking movie. And he's like, "Hey, take it easy on me," and then he didn't. So I kind of like that movie, like that scene for that. I'm going back to the other scene. The rundown castle, and maybe this shows you how like the setting matters so much. I love the tiger cage that has the monkeys in it.
That's so interesting the way they start that off with the ruins and the birds and the giraffes and the
Oh, it's just great. It's just so good. All right, you got one more scene if you got it for us. If not, we're moving on. What do you got?
The scene where I felt like everything really went downhill for him
Okay.
was the best friend,
Right.
Jedediah,
Oh,
when he's writing his review
that was my
of
backup.
the wife, and he passes out drunk because he's so conflicted about how to tell this part of it. Do I be honest? Do I stick with the guy I'm loyal to? You know, he makes or breaks my life. And then he goes and finishes it, doesn't change it, writes it, gives him credit for it, and then fires him. But not just fires him, gives him tons of money after he fires him.
Oh, yeah. It's so great.
Like, you're fired. Here's $25,000.
Yep.
And, you know, you're right. But I can't tell you you're right.
Exactly right. It's good.
I'm going to give you a little cushion here and then send you on your way.
It's a cool brosive moment. Like, hey, dude, I get it. But hey, man, I still got to be married to her. So you know what?
Yeah.
My favorite moment of that whole thing is when he picks it up, reads it himself, and laughs to himself.
Mm-hmm.
That is my favorite moment of that whole freaking scene.
Yeah.
Because he's just so, like, pleased with how...
He's not... You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's so good. I think about that in real life with so many things. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're not wrong, but I'm not going to say this crap because I'm going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we know this is a technical masterpiece. We know it changed cinema forever. Did you know, did I already say this, whether or not it was a box office hit?
It wasn't because of all the
drama.
The drama after.
Crazy.
The make or break people. Like, not just the guy that owned everything, but the gossip columnist who was buddies with everybody and was like, I'm going to wreck your life.
Yep. Because she got slighted because she didn't get invited to the first freaking screening. And the crazy thing is, a lot of people try to get at Kane, whoops, Freudian slip, at Orson Welles because they thought then they would put him in good standing with, Will and Miranda first because they just want to be, because he's the power. And, it's fun too. I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, watch Mank because it goes into the relationship between William Randolph Hearst and Mank before the friendship breaks up, and then he writes this whole thing. And so it's this like, oh my gosh.
The trigger. Yeah,
and you're ready for this other, here's a little hot take, so there's two things that people think Rosebud was, and neither one is attributed to
the sled.
Orson Welles.
Oh, Orson.
Because, you think it'd be like something in Orson Welles' life. Herman Mankiewicz, the writer, had a bike that was stolen when he was a kid. Named Rosebud.
Oh,
right?
Oh, nice.
And his mom said it was his fault and didn't buy him another bike. Right? It's almost worse than the movie, right?
Right. At least she got redeemed in the movie.
Yeah, kind of.
Ish.
I was still pissed at the end when I was the first time I watched it. It's so funny, like, now I'm like, oh, it had to be burned. You had to not resolve. But when I first watched it, I'm like, it's right there. I was so upset.
You guys did all this investigating, and it's in this pile.
Oh, my gosh.
Of all these things.
I'm stealing this joke from another thing I heard. Wait a minute. So you're telling me there's a newsreel that needs to go out in like 2 seconds, and they would say, hold up, let's figure out what this last word is. So they go on a manhunt for weeks? He's been dead for 2 weeks, folks. Are we really waiting to put that thing out?
Yeah.
And then now it's become a documentary on Netflix now, so now we can have a 6-episode series.
That's right. Oh, man. One thing I noticed when they were zooming out at the end over the whole vast collection of his stuff.
So good.
Was that those boxes, when the further you zoomed out, looked like New York skyline.
Oh, that's cool.
Buildings. And to me.
That's good.
I mean, I feel like
there's a hot take there.
Chicago or
that's a hot take there. I like that.
I noticed something there, I think.
No, I don't think you're wrong. That's like the
it was pretty cool.
The empire he built.
Yeah.
Is this empire of nothing.
Of junk.
Yeah.
Well, not junk, but
I just noticed there was a guitar case thrown into the freaking fire.
And you're like, what guitar was
probably freaking Martin, pre-war Martin. What's going on here?
Wasteful.
Just waste. That's all I think about.
Another thing I wanted to say too that I noticed, and it might just be a small part of the plot for them, but the fact that they talked about, the divorce happened, and then very quickly mentioned, and then she and his son die in a car accident.
Oh my gosh, isn't that? And
you're like, was that a blip? Like, because
what
at the end,
heck?
I had to go back and remind myself, did something happen to the son too? Like, what happened? Because who got all that money after he died? And I was like, oh, nobody knows now.
Yeah.
And like, they just
and he didn't
address it.
He wasn't hurt at all. Mm-hmm. Was he that much of a megalomaniac that his son dying didn't wreck him for a? Yeah, that is kind of
I had some thoughts.
That's
on
some
that
pretty poor plotting right there. Mm-hmm. That is funny, and that was
the big plot hole for me.
I have not seen anyone chat about that and how okay, first of all, yeah, the newsreel thing is hilarious, but yeah, your son died and no one talked about it. What it makes you not? It almost makes you kind of hate the guy, even
right.
Maybe he's the bad guy,
right?
I wonder if that's how people feel about certain candidates. Sometimes I'm like, man, these people seem like completely one way or the other kind of evil, but no, he's fine. Is he? And you know what? This is hard. This is the whole great man syndrome versus reality. I like that he's flawed. I hate perfect people in movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how to feel about it all the time. I used to listen to a podcast that talked about Dan Carlin, Hardcore History. Let's line up today. But he was talking about the SS. He was talking about Nazis, and he was talking about Genghis Khan. What the Mongolian Empire did when they just destroyed people and raped and just did these awful things. And they talked about how, the Mongolian Empire was the first globalization and all the great things that it brought. And so he said, how long until we are okay saying all the great things that Nazi Germany brought to the world? Right? Because they had a ton of innovations that just changed the world for the better. They were evil and hated and were a scourge upon the earth, but there was a ton of technological innovations from Nazi Germany.
Before and during the war.
Mm-hmm. He's like, but it's too close. He's like, in 100 years.
Because for a hot minute, Hitler looked like he might have beyond to some great ideas.
Can we talk about the Hitler connection to William Randolph Hearst real quick? Because it's kind of interesting. Because at first I laughed about the Hitler reference with Kane, but that's legit. William Randolph Hearst actually contracted Hitler to write for his paper. Now that's not crazy because he did it with everybody. He did it with Churchill, and he did it with Roosevelt, and so that was not a crazy thing. But he was also an America First guy. He was and he loved the nationalism that Hitler brought to Germany. But
clearly he was a compelling person to get that many people
good night.
To say, yeah, let's do this.
It's a good idea. Oh, we've only lost one world war. Let's see if we can chalk up another. Gosh. But in his credit, Hearst's credit, as soon as the night, what is it called? The night of the glass breaking. I forget what it's called. But when they first they broke all the Jews' shops and took them away to concentration, the first night the Nazis did that, he immediately went against Nazi Germany and immediately printed everything negative he could about Germany before anyone else did. So it's kind of this redeeming thing of oh, okay, so he's not a total horrible person in every respect. And he was a big collector, just like Kane was. And he made sure, reportedly, that none of his buyers or that him would buy from
someone that would
Jewish
make a
people stuff that was sold from Germany at the time. So there was that aspect that's okay, so you're not a horrible person. And the other thing about that was hilarious in the movie that they said was nothing close to reality. his castle, which is still in California, by the way, and you can visit it. Apparently, it was a party all the time. It was never this dreary.
Yeah. But man, his wife was bored.
Yeah. No, his wife was not bored in the reality. Yeah. There wasn't just puzzles in the park with tigers and monkeys.
Jigsaw
Those jigsaw puzzles, good. I can't. Oh, that did seem like a next level of hell. You know, that reminded me of what's that? I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeVille. But what's that movie? Boulevard. Oh, you know. Sunset Boulevard, where you're just alone in your isolation, and it's at that same like star level isolation. And then of course Howard Hughes. You know, that's originally
or like Zelda Fitzgerald and
Yes. You know, Howard Hughes is actually who Orson Welles wanted to do the movie on, but he felt it was too obvious.
Yeah, and he was probably a pretty hot target ticket at the time.
And the irony is, Howard Hughes was the rebel in Hollywood. He was more Orson Welles-esque than, you know. So is Hearst. Arguably, he shook up the newspaper industry for better or for worse. So, okay, we should probably wrap this up. But let's talk about our original WoW feelings and our takeaways, and then I'm going to talk about some of the implications and whether we would recommend this to a 2020 person. Let's just say a millennial and a Generation Z. Would we recommend it to them? Why or why not? Okay, so let's first talk about our general impression of the movie. We should make up some system. What should it be, like a number of beers we've drank, like top 3 out of 5 beers, 5 out of 5 beers, or the kind of beers? What should be our rating system here?
Oh yeah. Oh, that might be a whole other podcast. I
know, a whole rating system. I'm just gonna say let's say 5 beers, because if I've had 5 beers, that's a rough night. I'm paying for that for the next day and a half. But if it's that good, it might be worth it. You know, if it's that good. So we'll say 5 beers. 5 beers is like the pinnacle. And you can even go kinds of beers. You're like, yeah, that's 5 beers, but it's a high life. Like you might throw a Billy Madison to 5 beers high life. You know what I mean?
That's 2 natty ice.
And I'm like, oh, that'd be about 3.5 Black Pete Porters. Like, it's a solid. It's not like super unknown, but you know, it's solid. Everyone kind of heard of it. It's still a microbrew, so you still kind of know what's going on, but not really a microbrew anymore. So let's do that. It's going to be type of beer, and then and 1 out of 5, and how many? Obviously, how many would you drink?
Oh, good.
Okay. So, let's start with I'll start off with my overall impressions. It still plays true. Like I watch it and I think this is just really watchable. Despite all of the cinematography and whatever innovation, it's still watchable in 2022. Like I was not bored for 1 second. And that to me, especially on those older movies where we're so inundated with TikTok and my brain is constantly having to be entertained, I was so impressed by the pacing. It doesn't, and I feel like it could have been longer. If you would have gone into more details about his end of life and how it really spun out of control, like
where he got all those animals,
exactly right. There's so many things.
More about building Xanadu,
oh
please.
My gosh, it was so many things. I was like, yeah, I would watch another hour of this, no problem. And that's almost never the situation when you watch something from the 40s and 50s.
That's 2 hours.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's
unless it's Gone with the Wind, you're like, no.
Yeah. And even Gone with the Wind, we'll get to that one later, but the pace is not anything like this. Like this is it keeps it going. So I think it plays true as a movie. So that's my over impression. I think I, as a videographer, can learn so much from this and experiment with light. And it's crazy. I can experiment with light on all the different sections of the movie. I can watch this movie. So I would say not only is this beneficial for someone who's wanting to learn film, but it's almost an essential masterclass of saying, guess what? You can do these things without having to have a super expensive fast lens that could do that super shallow depth of field. But if you can get your light and your exposure and your feelings correct, you can kill it with almost a freaking iPhone. Because, you know, like you having these, the light is everything. The light is everything. So yeah, it is useful. It is entertaining. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's hard to say anything bad about it. Yes, it is not as perfect. It doesn't sound as perfect as a movie now, but it's in black and white. But other than that, like you're still like so entertained.
Absolutely. Yeah. From the beginning, I feel like, yeah, the cinematography draws you in. The story takes off immediately. You get like a really good setup, and then they execute the rest of it. There's so many parallels to life now. It's a guy in relationships. It's politics. It's money. It's, you know.
Yeah.
America.
America. It's America.
It's America.
It's America.
Guys. Dude.
Dude,
and
it's America.
It's, do you like him? Do you not like him? Would you vote for him?
Honestly,
even though he's sleeping with somebody else?
Oh my gosh, that should be our real question.
Would you have voted for him?
Voted for him?
Yeah.
We're not telling you his political party because that's messed up. But let's take off all the hot button issues because those weren't a thing back then.
Yeah.
The hot button issues like were you the gold standard or silver standard, which most people in America don't even know what that means anymore. Mm-hmm. So. Would you have voted for Citizen Kane? Yes or no?
Yes.
I might have too. I'm trying to think. So like
he was very well spoken.
41-year-old me says yes.
Yes.
22-year-old me was more pious. I thought I was more goody two shoes, so I might not have. I've been scandalized.
Oh, he has questionable morals.
I know. He'd been Clinton to me, which is hilarious because Clinton was like the most so popular.
If only we could
popular. I know, right?
If only that was the worst of her.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. I was looking at like the Clinton policies. I'm like, you would never be able to be a Democrat now. And I was looking at the Bush policies. I'm like, you would never be able to be a Republican now.
That was the last time my dad was like, yes, I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, are you really a Democrat?
Yeah. Yeah. Not anymore.
Not so much.
Not anymore. Oh, imagine old Democrats. Oh, they're in big cities.
One thing I want to point out too about the movie and which generation is into this.
Ooh.
I'm talking about, so I talked to my mom about watching this movie talking about this movie. And I could probably speak for your mom too on this, as it's not one of their movies.
No, it's not.
Because it's dark.
Exactly
because
right.
It's sad. Because they make questionable decisions. Because there's no music.
There is, but it's not good.
They're not singing, and if they are, it's not good singing.
It's a making fun of singing sort of thing.
Yeah, it's too dark.
Definitely.
And these are people that were born after this movie.
100%.
And so that also might speak to how successful the movie was at the time.
Well, you know, it's funny though. Ironically, you say that. Guess what happened? 1940s, was it 46, 48? It started being played on TV.
Oh.
Yeah, and that changed everything. And then they reevaluated it. And that's when they finally decided, oh, this is apparently really good now.
It's like the Cable Guy.
Yes! So underrated.
On the list.
On the list. Citizen Kane, Cable Guy. Neck and neck.
Also worked a lot with lighting.
That Matthew Broderick, he just doesn't miss. Am I right? Oh my gosh. Cable Guy. That was I wonder if Jim Carrey likes people who quote Cable Guy. You know, like, because I feel like actors prefer when you know they're like underappreciated work that they thought was really good.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, I would actually be interested what Orson Welles, if he liked that people liked Citizen Kane.
I would like to see a couple of people a decade younger than us watch it for the first time and get some impressions.
Yeah. No, I would like to see a teenager watch it. I would like to see a 25-year-old watch it and a 35-year-old watch it, because that would be for the first time. Shoot, I'd like to see my wife watch it for the first time.
Yeah, let's get her pinned down first.
She'd be like, nope, this is not a Christmas movie and it's not Hallmark. I am out. By the way, you see that new Hallmark? No, it's not Hallmark, but it's a Christmas movie with freaking Mean Girl. What's her name?
Not yet, but I am tempted.
No, you know what I heard? I'm relating it to Citizen Kane. It was called The Citizen Kane of Christmas movies.
That's interesting. Very.
Yes, folks, we are talking about the one, the only. Oh my gosh, just forgot her name.
Lindsay Lohan.
Lindsay Lohan.
Side note.
Not dead yet.
Mrs. Guest. Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, I love
really
Jamie
wants
Lee Curtis.
to bring back Freaky Friday with her.
Oh, I'm down.
She's desperate for a sequel.
Oh, well, Jamie Lee Curtis, man. You know what her secret is? She told it one time, she never says no to a role. That was her secret. And I'm like, I could believe that. Yeah, I could see that.
Those two are so funny.
Oh, they're so funny. So, do you think, we don't have the proof, but do you think would millennials, that's age like 20, maybe it's like 25 now, 25
I don't
to
even
35.
know what letter we are.
We're X. We're Xennials. We're like that mid, we're like kind of the transition stage. We like remember when Kurt Cobain died, but we can still use TikTok. Yeah, we're the transition.
Do you also remember when there weren't cell phones accessible?
Oh yeah, we didn't have cell phones in college. Shoot, unless you're rich or a drug dealer. Looking at you, Paul.
Oh, my pager just went off.
I know. I'm like, okay, doctor or drug dealer, same thing.
Prescription.
Oh man.
Yeah, I would be curious to see the younger.
Okay,
I think it would go over well.
Yeah, I think hipsters would like it. Obviously.
Yeah.
Like they can't. Like they're like, oh yeah, and it just the part like there's so many parts that you're like, is this 2022? Like when Kane loses, it's like Kane wins, and the other one was like voter fraud, and I'm like, oh crap, oh jeez.
Oh yeah, I love that they had both headlines printed.
Ready. Oh my gosh, so good. It reminds me of before that. You know, Truman was reported to have lost the presidential race when he won.
Oh.
The newspaper came out that says Truman loses, and this says Dewey wins.
Oh wow!
And because they hate it.
That's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, because there's a picture of him of Truman holding Dewey wins, and just like living it up, because no one thought he could win after, because Roosevelt didn't even count him in. So yeah, same sort of thing. Like he had no business winning, but he did.
They do that with bowl games.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I see that junk when I was overseas.
I worked in the stock room at JCPenney, and when we got the box, they were hot. The shirts that were freshly printed were still warm out of the box.
Wow.
You weren't sure who was going to be in the game or who was.
Crazy. Hot
off the press.
Oh, that's terrible. Ugh, well, that's depressing. Well, America. The American. So, I would give this 5 beers. Easy. The type of beer, I would go top shelf. And it has to be an older brand because it's a classic. But it's definitely a beer. Like I would go like a triple, some sort of like monk triple beer, which would get me wasted in 2 of them. But I would go so I'd be a Belgian monk. Let's say a Brother Thelonious 5 beers. That's a high praise, by the way. Brother Thelonious.
It's good. Oh, I mean, I would definitely give it a solid 4 IPAs. Which
IPA though? We're not talking like.
That's what I'm trying to decide.
Or if you're so we're from Oregon, Willamette Valley near Salem. The snobby IPA, of course, is a Tack Owl. I don't know if you've had that one, but that's the Salem IPA.
I'm a pretty big Breakside.
Breakside's good. Yeah, good beer.
Unicorns and Rainbows. Is
that's a good one.
Fave.
Ooh, do you like that more than the 3-way?
Oh,
3-way is my fave.
More than 3-way.
Okay.
I still love just Breakside.
Breakside, yeah, not just the. So for those of you who are not from Oregon, there's an amazing IPA called Three Way, which is 3 breweries working together that makes an IPA.
Mm-hmm. I would give it I give it 4 Fort Georges.
Ooh, which Fort George?
The green and brown one.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
What's that one?
That's Vortex. Vortex IPA.
4 Vortex.
4 Vortex IPAs.
I think that's a
good
solid rating.
That's a solid rating, yeah. Yeah, ironically enough, Fort George is also part of the 3-way IPA.
Yeah, that's what made me kind of think, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Fort
Anyways.
George.
All right. Well, this has been. I've really enjoyed this deep dive of it. I feel like I didn't think I was going to get. I thought I was going to get more involved in like the history and the mildew, but I was just. The movie still wins out over the drama. Like, despite all the craziness that the story is and how crazy Orson Welles' life is, I would say my final thoughts about this movie is. It's still a dang good movie.
It's a solid
that
movie.
just is inspiring of what can be done without knowing better. And it was
a good story and a vision.
It was 30% under budget. It was ahead of schedule when it was done. And it was just some punk kid who didn't know what he was doing. I mean, he was a genius punk kid who could, like, you know...
Talented punk kid.
Incredibly talented punk kid. But
punk
still,
kid like Seth's punk kid.
Yeah. I don't think my...
Speaking of
my lovely
extremely
daughter-
verbal.
Yeah. She is extremely verbal. I say she gets it from her mom, but it's definitely not from her. But the brain she gets from her mom, that's for sure. Anyways. Well, guys, thank you for taking this journey through Orson Welles' amazing classic, Citizen Kane. We will be coming to you with more movie snobbery, and our goal is to become movie snobs, and we hope you can also become movie snobs with us and be better.
Please join us.
Please join us for movie snobberies. Till next time, guys. Thanks.
Bye.